The moment I saw my neighbor, Cheryl, storm across my lawn with a stack of envelopes in her hand like she was on a mission from the president, I knew I was about to have a bad day. "Excuse me, Jacob," she barked, holding my mail like it was evidence in a criminal case. "You've been receiving packages that violate HOA standards. As acting secretary of the Oak Hills Homeowners Association, I've confiscated them for inspection." I blinked. "You what now?" She waved the envelopes like a flag. "HOA regulations prohibit commercial deliveries over a certain weight. These violate that, and that catalog clearly soliciting unapproved landscaping services." I stepped down from my porch, trying not to blow a fuse. "That's my mail, Cheryl. You can't touch it." "Oh, I can," she said, puffing herself up like an overcooked soufflé. "Article 5, subsection 3 of our bylaws gives me authority to protect the community from inappropriate materials." "Your bylaws don't trump federal law," I said, grabbing my phone. "That's a felony." "You just committed mail theft," Cheryl scoffed. "Don't be dramatic, Jacob. I'm not stealing. I'm enforcing." I dealt with her nonsense before HOA fines for leaving my porch light on too long, threats over my American flag being 2 inches too wide, even a warning for excessive laughter during a backyard barbecue. But this was new. I didn't argue further. I didn't need to. I watched her stomp back to her house, clutching my mail like a trophy. I waited until she disappeared inside, then walked straight into mine and dialed the number I never thought I'd need. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service. The woman on the line took it seriously. "If she's holding your mail without authorization," she said, "that's a federal offense. We'll open an investigation immediately." 2 days later, a plain black sedan rolled slowly through the neighborhood. 2 inspectors stepped out, flashed badges, and knocked on Cheryl's door. I watched from my window as she answered in her usual robe and curlers, a mug of tea in hand, and then turned pale as they started asking questions. I could only imagine how she tried to spin it. Probably said something like, "I was just helping the community." But the feds didn't look impressed. Later that afternoon, I got my mail back in a plastic evidence bag. One of the inspectors handed it to me and said, "We'll be following up. Thank you for reporting this, Mr. Carson." I nodded. Glad someone takes the law seriously around here. By dinner, the whole block was buzzing. Word had spread fast that Cheryl, the woman who once fined a family for hanging Halloween decorations too early, was now under investigation by federal authorities. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. The morning after Cheryl's unexpected visit from the federal inspectors, a strange silence settled over Oak Hills. For the first time in months, her front yard lacked the usual parade of sun hats, clipboards, and whispering HOA board members. The compliance patrol, as she liked to call them, had apparently gone underground. I wasn't surprised when my doorbell rang just past 9. What did surprise me was who stood there. "Jacob," said Marcus, the HOA's treasurer. He was usually glued to Cheryl's side at every community meeting, nodding like a bobblehead while she rattled off citations. Today, though, he looked like he hadn't slept. "I need to talk. Not as HOA," he added quickly, "just as a neighbor." I let him in, mostly out of curiosity. He glanced around like he expected Cheryl to pop out from behind a lamp. "I didn't know she went that far," he said, settling on the edge of the couch. "Nobody else on the board approved it. She's been making unilateral decisions and, well, some of us are starting to worry." I folded my arms. "Starting? She's been running this place like a dictatorship for 3 years. He rubbed his hands together, clearly uncomfortable. "We let it slide. She's persuasive. She convinced us it was all for the good of the neighborhood, but now she's in serious trouble." "Federal? She's lucky it's not worse," I said. "If she'd tampered with anything sensitive, she'd be facing prison." He nodded, hesitated, then leaned in. "There's something else. She's been using HOA funds for, well, things that don't show up on the community budgets. Luxury landscaping consultations, private legal advice, even a new security system for her own house, billed as neighborhood surveillance." I narrowed my eyes. "And you just found out," he sighed. We only started questioning the numbers after the inspectors showed up. I looked through the last year's ledger. There's close to 70,000 missing, none of it authorized. I stood. That's embezzlement, he looked down. We know, and we're compiling everything now. Copies of checks, statements, emails. I need someone who's not on the board to take it to the district attorney. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to tell him to clean up his own mess. But the other part, the part that had spent years watching Cheryl bully good people out of their homes, knew this was the only way to shut it all down for good. I'll take it, I said. But if I do, I'm not stopping at Cheryl. His eyes widened. You're going after the HOA, I'm going after the truth, I said, grabbing a notepad. And if the truth is that the entire board let her run wild while they looked the other way, then yeah. I'm going after the HOA. Within an hour, Marcus returned with a flash drive and a folder packed with documents. I spent the next 2 days scrutinizing every line, every strange invoice, every memo with Cheryl's signature. There were payments to non-existent vendors, cash withdrawals labeled as miscellaneous outreach, and even a wire transfer to a company in Florida registered to Cheryl's cousin. The final piece was a series of emails she'd sent to the board, instructing them to approve expenditures without delay and assuring them legal consultation has validated our discretionary authority. None of it held water. By Friday, I had enough to fill a binder. I scheduled a meeting with Assistant District Attorney Layla Tran, who specialized in white-collar crime. When I laid the evidence on her desk, she didn't even blink. We've been hearing things about Oak Hills for a while, she said, flipping through the folder. But no one's come forward with this level of detail before. What happens now? I asked. We open an official investigation. If the financial records hold up, we'll pursue charges. Depending on the scale, we might involve the state attorney general's office. And if anyone else on the board was complicit, they'll be named too. That Sunday, Cheryl returned to her usual routine, pretending nothing had happened. She held court at the community center, handing out flyers about a mandatory lawn inspection scheduled for next week. I watched from across the street. Her confidence was intact, but her audience was shrinking. People accepted the flyers with forced smiles, then tossed them into the nearest trash can. The following Wednesday, things came to a head. A convoy of unmarked vehicles rolled into Oak Hills just after noon. Ada Tran stepped out with 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit. They walked straight past my house and up to Cheryl's door. She answered in full regalia. Blazer, clipboard, and a Bluetooth headset she never actually used. Her expression shifted when she saw the badges. "This is private property," she said, trying to close the door. But Tran had already placed her foot across the threshold. "Miss Delaney, you're under investigation for financial misconduct related to your role in the Oak Hills Homeowners Association. We have a warrant to search the premises." The board members gathered within minutes, hovering like vultures. Marcus stood off to the side, arms crossed, looking like a man torn between vindication and shame. Cheryl was led out an hour later, hands cuffed behind her back. The Bluetooth headset was gone. So was the blazer. She looked smaller without them. The crowd didn't cheer, they didn't clap. But they didn't look away either. That evening, Tran called to update me. "We've confirmed approximately $84,000 in unauthorized spending," she said. "Charges include embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction. What about the rest of the board? We're still investigating. If they signed off knowingly, they'll be charged. If they were misled but didn't benefit, they may be called as witnesses." I thanked her and hung up. Outside, a few neighbors were gathering on my lawn. People I hadn't spoken to in months. They brought folding chairs, iced tea, and stories of fines that bankrupted retirees, of threats that pushed families to sell, of community events canceled because Cheryl didn't like the decorations. Eventually, someone asked the question I'd hoped to hear. "So, what happens to the HOA now?" I looked around. "We vote, we replace the board, and this time we make sure they work for us." Nobody argued. By the end of the week, We had signatures from over 2/3 of the residents calling for a recall. A special election was scheduled. The old guard tried to resist, but with their queen gone and their secrets exposed, they folded fast. Cheryl's trial was scheduled for the following spring. Last I heard, she was trying to cut a deal. But no matter how it played out, Oak Hills would never go back to what it was, and neither would I. The day after Cheryl's arrest, I woke up to the sound of a leaf blower. Not unusual for Oak Hills, except it was coming from Cheryl's yard. I peeked through the blinds and saw her husband, Greg, dragging bags of mulch across their lawn like he was trying to erase her existence one flowerbed at a time. He hadn't so much as looked at her rake in years. Now he was out there like a man on borrowed time. Mid-morning, I got a call from Assistant District Attorney Tran. "We've uncovered something bigger," she said, her tone clipped. "Do you have a moment to meet in person?" She didn't wait for a yes. 15 minutes later, she stood in my living room, setting down a thick folder. "We're expanding the investigation." Cheryl's financial activity wasn't limited to HOA funds. She was funneling payments from residents into a personal account, posing as a third-party contractor for HOA services that never existed. I flipped through the documents. There were forged invoices for pest control, gutter maintenance, even a community-wide tree health assessment. Every so-called vendor had the same routing number 1 tied to an account in Cheryl's maiden name. Tran continued, "We've identified over 30 residents who paid for these services. Most assumed it was part of their dues, but the HOA has no record of authorizing any of it. And the worst part, one of the fees she charged was to a disabled veteran on a fixed income. She threatened him with a lien if he didn't comply." I clenched my jaw. "So she wasn't just stealing, she was extorting people." Tran nodded. "We're classifying it as wire fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. The state attorney general is stepping in." I didn't realize I'd sat down until I noticed the edge of the couch cushion digging into my leg. "I also need to ask," she added, "have you ever interacted with a man named Curtis Weller?" I frowned. "Can't say I have." "Why?" "He's listed as the legal counsel Cheryl claimed was advising the HOA, but we ran the name no license to practice law. Turns out he's her cousin. Former real estate agent. Lost his license 3 years ago for falsifying property disclosures. She paid him nearly $20,000 over 2 years and used his advice to justify policy changes. That explains the sudden rule about unpermitted roof ornamentation," I muttered. "Someone got fined for putting up a birdhouse." Tran gave a weary smile. "We're filing conspiracy charges, and we're issuing warrants for Weller as well." By the time she left, I had a fresh stack of documents, an adrenaline headache, and a call from Marcus, this time sounding far less nervous. "We've got a problem," he said. "Cheryl's laptop is missing, the one she used for HOA business. It was in the community office until yesterday. We have video of Greg entering, but nothing showing him leaving with it. Cameras cut off for 3 hours. I stood up. "You're saying someone tampered with the footage?" "It looks that way. And there's more. That same night, the office printer was used to generate a dozen retroactive meeting minutes for board votes that never happened. I think someone's trying to cover tracks." I grabbed my keys. "Meet me there in 20. When I arrived at the Oak Hills Community Center, the place was already swarming. Marcus stood near the entrance, flanked by 2 newly elected board members, Linda, a retired court stenographer, and Aaron, a former firefighter with a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense. Inside, the office was chaos. Files were out of order, drawers left open, and the printer was still warm to the touch. Aaron gestured toward the screen mounted in the corner. "This is the camera feed. Look, footage cuts out at exactly 11:42, comes back at 2:58. And the laptop's gone," Linda pointed to the logs. "The fabricated minutes all have digital timestamps matching the blackout. Whoever did this wasn't subtle." I turned to Marcus. "We need to find out where that laptop went. If Greg took it, he's tampering with evidence." Aaron nodded. "Already filed a report with Officer Delgado. He's heading over now." Officer Delgado, a seasoned cop with a reputation for patience until provoked, arrived within the hour. After reviewing the footage and statements, he turned to me. "Jacob, I understand you've been coordinating with the district attorney." I handed him Tran's card. "She'll confirm everything." Delgado nodded. "Then we're elevating this. Theft of evidence during an active investigation, that's felony obstruction. If we confirm Greg took that laptop, he's going to jail." It didn't take long. The next day, police executed a search warrant on Cheryl and Greg's home. The laptop was found inside a locked cabinet in their garage wrapped in a towel, buried under a box of fake poinsettias. Greg was arrested on the spot. The charges: obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and unlawful access to restricted files. Cheryl's expression during his perp walk was the first time she looked genuinely lost. No clipped orders, no clipboard, just a woman watching the last thread snap. Later that week, Ada Tran called again. "We've recovered emails from the laptop. Greg was helping Cheryl draft fake documents to retroactively justify fines she issued over the past year, including liens. One couple had nearly $20,000 in penalties fabricated from thin air. Are they getting it back? Every penny. We're pushing restitution as part of the sentencing." And because the funds were collected under fraudulent pretenses, victims can sue for triple damages. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. How many victims total? 47, and counting. The fallout was swift. News vans rolled through Oak Hills for the first time since the ribbon-cutting ceremony a decade ago. Reporters camped outside the community gates, interviewing residents brave enough to speak. Most were. The floodgates had opened. During the next town hall, the room was packed wall to wall. Nobody talked over each other. Nobody passed out citations. Linda presided with a calm, clear agenda. Aaron ensured decorum with nothing more than a look. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, holding a folder of printouts. "I've submitted a request to the City Council to audit Oak Hill's HOA status. If approved, we'll transition from a mandatory association to a voluntary civic committee. That means no more fines, no more forced compliance, and no more unchecked power." A long pause, then applause, loud, sustained. Honest, after the meeting, a woman I didn't recognize approached me outside. Mid-60s, cane in hand, with a pin from the Air Force on her scarf. "You're the one who stopped her," she said. "I just made a phone call." She shook her head. "No, you stood up." The rest of us forgot how. She handed me a folded letter. "That's from my husband. He passed last year. Cheryl tried to evict us over a shed he built before the bylaws changed. He wrote this before he died. Said someone needed to know." I opened it when I got home. His handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. A list of dates, threats, and payments Cheryl demanded under the table. I scanned it and sent it to Tran immediately. Her reply came within the hour. "This changes everything. That shed was never in violation. She had no legal standing. We're adding civil rights violations to the list." Weeks passed. Then months. Cheryl's trial began in the spring. She faced over a dozen charges: fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, mail theft, and more. She pled not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her cousin Weller was extradited from Florida. Greg flipped, offering full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentencing. The jury took 4 hours to convict. Sentencing was set for early summer. Cheryl faced a minimum of 15 years. Greg got 2.5, Weller 5, with mandatory restitution. Oak Hills changed after that. The HOA was dissolved by majority vote. The new civic committee ran on transparency and volunteerism. No fines, no fear, just neighbors helping neighbors, and me. I planted a birdhouse, painted it neon green. Hung a wind chime from it too. No one complained. 3 weeks after Cheryl's conviction, Oak Hills had become something it hadn't been in years: quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't come from fear or suppression, but peace. People walked their dogs without side-eyeing their mailboxes. Kids rode bikes without being followed by clipboard-wielding zealots. But then, on a Tuesday morning, a letter showed up in my mailbox. It was from the Office of Regulatory Affairs and Community Oversight, a new division created by the state legislature in response to a growing number of HOA abuse cases across the region. Oak Hills had evidently made it onto their radar, and the letter requested my cooperation for a formal review of how our HOA had operated under Cheryl's leadership, specifically regarding non-disclosure of expenditures and unauthorized data collection. I sat with the envelope for a while before opening it. The idea that someone, somewhere in government, was finally paying attention to the pattern, not just the crimes, meant the wheels of reform were starting to turn. That afternoon, I met with a state investigator, a woman named Dana Kim. She was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, and carried herself like someone who'd spent her fair share of time dismantling institutional rot. "I've reviewed your notes and the court documents," she said, flipping through her tablet. "But there's something buried in the financial ledgers that raises a bigger question. Cheryl used HOA funds to purchase a data subscription from a company called CivicMon. Ever heard of it?" "No," I said. "What does it do?" "It's a residential surveillance platform," Dana said. "Usually used by municipalities to monitor public areas' traffic, park usage, that sort of thing. But this subscription was tied to private property addresses, your neighborhood, including GPS pings and vehicle plate recognition." My stomach turned. She was tracking residents? It appears so. We subpoenaed CivicMon. They confirmed someone using the HOA account created a geofence around over 24 properties, tracking comings and goings, logging license plates, and exporting that data to a personal server. "She had no legal right to do any of that," I said, leaning forward. Dana nodded. "That's the problem. It falls into a gray area. She used public funds under false pretenses to purchase a tool with significant surveillance capability. But because it wasn't state-sanctioned, it skirts existing privacy statutes. What can be done? We're working on it. In the meantime, we're opening a new investigation into digital civil rights violations. If we can prove she used the data to target specific residents or influence board decisions, it could be prosecuted under cyberstalking and unauthorized data collection laws. I remembered the elderly couple who'd moved out last year after receiving a series of anonymous citations claiming they were harboring unauthorized guests. They never found out who made the complaint. The system Cheryl used could have told her exactly when their granddaughter visited and for how long. Dana closed her tablet. "We'll need statements from residents who believe they were targeted. If you can help us organize that, we'll move faster." "I'll get you 20 names by the weekend," I said. It didn't take that long. By Thursday, I had 37. Some had kept quiet during the trial, thinking the worst was behind them. But when I explained the surveillance system that Cheryl had been tracking their movements, they were furious. One man, a retired postal worker, had already suspected something was off. His mail was delayed or rerouted multiple times last year, and now it made sense. We held a community meeting not in the old HOA center, but in the local library auditorium. Dana attended with a team from the state's legal department. They took testimonies, answered questions, and distributed affidavits. What emerged over the next few days was worse than anyone expected. Cheryl had used the surveillance reports to justify enforcement actions. Residents whose cars were recorded as frequently absent received threats of absentee property management violations, an invented infraction with no legal basis. Others whose guests stayed past 11 p.m. were cited under a quiet hours clause that didn't even exist in the bylaws. Worse yet, she'd shared some of the data with her cousin, Weller. Emails recovered from his server showed he had used the information to build sham legal threats templates with fake letterheads that mimicked county notices. He then billed the HOA for legal consultation to send the letters Cheryl had requested. The new charges came swiftly. The state attorney general added digital privacy violations, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and impersonation of legal authority to Cheryl's record. Weller was hit with identity fraud and unauthorized legal practice across state lines. Cheryl's 15-year sentence was extended by 7 more after she failed to disclose the Civic Mon subscription during her trial. Weller's reduced sentence was revoked, and extradition was reinitiated. Greg, having already served 6 months, was subpoenaed again, but this time as a witness. As part of an extended plea agreement, he agreed to testify about the installation of hidden license plate cameras installed under Cheryl's direction. He had helped mount them near the entrance signs, camouflaged in decorative lanterns. The cameras had been feeding directly into a private server, one Cheryl kept in a secure storage unit registered to a dummy LLC. When law enforcement raided the unit, they found logs dating back nearly 2 years. It was a digital dossier on the entire neighborhood. During the final hearing, the judge didn't mince words. This court finds that the defendant, Cheryl Delaney, knowingly and willfully violated the constitutional rights of her neighbors under the false pretense of community governance. Her actions were not merely deceptive, they were invasive, retaliatory, and systemic. The court imposes a total sentence of 22 years, with no possibility of parole for the first 15. The courtroom was silent, not because people were shocked, but because they were finally at peace. Dana met me outside the courthouse steps. "You helped set a precedent," she said. "We're drafting a bill now. HOA boards across the state will have to register their surveillance policies. Any attempt to use private data without consent will be a felony." "Good," I said. It's time they stopped hiding behind clipboards. By summer, Oak Hills was no longer just a cautionary tale, it was a case study in how to reclaim a neighborhood. The state implemented new legislation requiring transparency audits for all HOAs with over 50 homes. Anonymous enforcement was outlawed. Residents now had access to a public ledger of where their dues went, and all board meetings were live-streamed for accountability. The old community center was converted into a shared space for social events, tutoring programs, and weekend markets. The camera poles were taken down. The Civic Mon account was terminated, and every resident received a formal apology from the state for the violation of their privacy. A plaque went up outside the library, commemorating the case, "In defense of community over control." May residents always govern, not be governed. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want my name on it, but I did attend the unveiling. I stood in the back watching kids run past it without stopping. That was fine. Let them play. Let them grow up in a neighborhood where the only thing watching them is the sun and the sky. Later that fall, I ran into Dana again at a town hall in a different district. She was consulting on another investigation, one that bore eerie similarities to Oak Hills. "More of them out there?" I asked. "More than we thought," she replied. "But they're easier to spot now and harder to ignore," I nodded. "Good, let them know we're watching legally, of course," she laughed. "Legally, always." And that was it. No parades, no headlines, just a neighborhood that remembered how to breathe again. Cheryl's house went up for auction, stripped of its power along with its shingles. A young couple moved in, first-time homeowners who planted a garden in the front yard without asking for permission. No one stopped them. No one ever would again.